I've been in the music production business for over a decade, and in that time, a lot of things have changed. And one of the biggest changes has been the decline in the middle class of music producers. Now, I'm not saying that you can't make a living doing music. I don't want this to be a doom and gloom video. And at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about a lot of ways that you can avoid this situation affecting you. But the truth is, charging for music production, for audio services, mixing, mastering, it's not what it used to be. And there are a couple big reasons that I think we can all point to that are going to make a lot of sense. So the first reason is simply that gear is more affordable and available than ever. And I like to think of the dividing line on this timeline as 2011. And that's the year that the first Focusrite Scarlett interfaces came out. And to me, that's a huge dividing line because before that, it was a little bit tougher to really get into digital recording in a way that was super easy and simple. Back when I first started out, it was not nearly as simple, but the Scarlett made it truly plug and play. Like there were some USB interfaces, but they were not as easy to use and as good sounding as the Scarlett. So from there, you have this massive jump where the prosumer kind of semi-pro audio stuff is just way better than it was back then. And of course, that's had an effect on the business. Think about it like you would photography. When the first cameras were invented, the only people who had cameras were photographers. Like you could have a whole business just basically owning a camera and founding an LLC and then taking pictures of things that need to be photographed. And you still can be a photographer professionally. But just because you have a camera, that doesn't mean you're going to be booked solid. When I was a kid, people were paying tons of money to get, corporate headshots or school pictures. Like this was a big deal. These were the only pictures you were going to get that looked really good and printed out really nice. But now you've got the iPhone camera looking better than digital cameras that were this big, 10 years ago. And then think about people who owned a helicopter to do aerial photography. Like that used to be the equipment you needed to take a picture from the sky. But now you can get a drone for like $500 and get really good aerial photography. And in music, it's kind of the same way. Like if you needed a giant console and this huge studio to record 16 or 24 or 48 tracks, well, now you can, fit it in gear this big in this room. I can do 32 tracks easy. And that just wasn't the case back then. So pro audio is kind of going through that same moment that photography did. I think you get the idea. But the other factor is that budgets are not what they used to be either. So top level artists still have budgets to spend on having big teams and huge studios. But that regional band kind of thing doesn't really exist the way that it used to. Between iTunes and CD sales versus like streaming, obviously the money on the recorded music just isn't there. And the cost of going on tour is just going up and up and up. So I've noticed there's a lot fewer regional club-size acts that are looking to book time to record their CD to go sell on the road. That's just not the model anymore. And so these big projects where you're recording like 10, 12 songs at a time, and they're doing it quick because these are people that were playing it on the road, it's just not really the way that this stuff works for most producers anymore. So as that middle class of musicians starts to thin out just a little bit, that's kind of having a trickle-down effect on all the pro audio folks who are contractors for those musicians. So how do we avoid falling victim to this? What do we do to improve this situation? Well, I'm glad you asked because I have a few ideas. Now, number one seems a little trite, but that is to get really, really, really stinking good. The harsh truth is that most people who want to do this as a profession, they get their starter equipment and they start learning, and as soon as they're good enough to start charging for people to record with them, they don't really grow much more after that. Or if they do, they're growing really slowly because they're just taking on projects, doing the projects, sending it off, and that's it. And so year over year, a lot of people just aren't leveling up as producers or as engineers. They're not getting that much better. So if you're having a hard time getting booked and staying busy, it might be worth taking a look at yourself and saying, hey, am I learning? Am I growing? Am I improving from project to project enough that I'm competing with other people trying to do the same thing? Or am I even competing with people who can just buy their own gear and spend a few months learning how to use it? If your answer to that is, I'm not really sure, then it might be time to put your head down and just grind out more practice and focus on just getting better. Now, number 2 is to have a thing that you're known for, but also being able to do a lot. So in a lot of business advice kind of tutorial videos, you're going to hear that you need to be niching down and finding that one thing that you're great at and focusing really hard on that, that 80-20 kind of thing. But the truth is, you can't always afford to do that. When I first started out, all I wanted to do was produce. I didn't want to be the person touching the mics or the board. I didn't want to do mixing. I just wanted to be the ideas guy, right? I just wanted to focus on production. But the truth is that really limited the amount of work that I could do, because that meant someone had to have a budget for a producer, an engineer, and a mixer. So let's say they had $1,000 budget to do a song. Well, that's not enough for me to do that and get other people involved. But maybe it does make sense if you can engineer, produce, and mix something and you just get it done in a couple of days and you get that $1,000, right? Now, those are just made up numbers. Obviously, people's rates are gonna vary a lot depending on a lot of different factors. All I'm saying is if you only do the one thing forever, in an industry like this, there might be work that you miss out on. On the flip side, what I've seen a lot of people do is start bigger and start to grow as a producer and a mixer and an engineer and whatever it is, but that's something that happened naturally. It's not something that they decided, I'm never gonna take production work again, I'm only gonna mix. And if you try to force it from the beginning, you're gonna lose a lot of work to people who are a lot more flexible than you. Now, number 3, and this is a tough one, especially for us folks who barely leave the studio cave, but that's getting really good at talking to people. The truth of the matter is there are a lot of engineers and producers who miss out on work because they just don't talk to people enough. If you're not following up with people, if you're not going to gigs, if you're not getting to know artists and asking them what they're working on and how you can help, then you're leaving a lot of work on the table. Basically, if you're letting other people dictate the speed of the conversations and making them reach out to you to get information, then you're just not going to be booked. And if you're spending that time when you're not booked, wondering why you're not booked instead of reaching out to more people and starting more conversations, then that cycle is just going to repeat and you're going to be less and less busy as time goes on. So learning how to network, learning how to talk to people, learning how to keep up with your clients and getting to know them and being really interested in what they're doing, that is going to be huge. And that is something that has helped me book a lot of work, just being a proactive conversational person, even though sometimes it is hard. And number 4 is something that I'm a huge proponent of, and that is diversifying your work. And that's not me saying produce, mix, master, engineer, all that. I'm saying the scope of the kinds of projects that you're doing can probably be expanded. So for example, I primarily work with artists, singer-songwriters, and bands, but I spent a ton of the last 6 or 8 months working on commercial projects. So doing TV compositions and doing projects for holiday events like Halloween and Christmas events, kind of theme parky sorts of music. And that stuff has paid me pretty well and has allowed me to stay busy and booked without relying on hitting up artists and bands and singer-songwriters. So if you can find other types of work besides just the bands and artists that live close to you, that is going to be a huge help. Because yes, this music industry stuff is very seasonal and there's a lot of ups and downs, but if you can spread out and work in different facets of the industry and have different kinds of clients, it's going to make things a lot more stable and you're going to have a lot more irons in the fire and a lot more people that are actually hitting you up to work, because you're not just working with the 15 or 20 local bands or the singer-songwriters around you. You're working for companies, you're working for event corporations, you're doing things other than just waiting for people to book you to work on music. So if you can do that, if you can find a way into that, that is going to help you with stability a ton. And number 5 is to have a differentiator. There needs to be something that separates working with you from working with just any other person that has the gear or the artist just doing it themselves. Now that could be a certain set of techniques, that could be your signature sound. It could be the vibe of your studio. It could be how comfortable it is to work with you. It could be that you're really freaking nice all the time, or that you make the best coffee in town and you just so happen to serve it to all the artists that you work with. Whatever it is, think about, if I was booking studio time or booking an engineer, what would they be able to do besides work on the music that would make me want to come back and that would make me excited to book them again? So figure out something that differentiates you from other people and makes your experience just a little more elevated, and you will have a better time getting booked and staying busy, which is what we're all here for, right? Now, if you want even more advice about how to produce music for a living, I've got a video called "If You Want to Produce Music for a Living, Watch This." So if that's you, watch this. I think it'll help.